There are some figures whose imprint on history is so significant that our everyday existence is in large part a consequence of decisions that they made. And one of the men who left an indelible impression on the West is Julius Caesar. His reputation as a master military tactician and a political prodigy led centuries of emperors, generals, kings, princes, and dictators, both real and imagined, to compare themselves to him. From Napoleon Bonaparte to Francisco Franco and Benito Mussolini to the charismatic king of the cerebral primates in the dramatic adaptations of Planet of the Apes, his status stands supreme. And beyond a renown for amassing raw power, his legacy looms over so much more. Caesar is credited as one of the creators of the Codex, replacing scrolls with bound books, improving the security, storage, and retrieval of information. He was the first to formally found the ancient equivalent of a newspaper, which he called Acta Diurna, or Events of the Day. He was the first to institute a 12-month, 365-day solar year, starting with January 1st, which he humbly called the Julian calendar, with the month of July named in his honor. He was the first ruler in the ancient world to systematically imprint his portrait on the currency, cementing his fame and making his face both the most celebrated in the nation and the most associated with wealth, success, reach, and power. So every time that we hold a bound book or read a daily paper or celebrate an English birthday or put the portrait of a political figure in our pocket or the palm of our hands, we are participating in the legacy of the man whose life transformed Rome from a republic into an empire. And from Italian salads to Russian tsars, his name and memory lives on in our language. Caesarean sections are so called because of him. Political betrayals are called backstabbings because of him. And punchy, pithy, witty sloganeering has also been seen as his invention when he wrote a letter to the Senate after an unexpectedly swift military success saying, Veni, vidi, vici, which means, I came, I saw, I conquered. Which leads us to an equally punchy and pithy turn of phrase associated with this holiday, when we read one of the only times in the Hebrew Bible of 3 consecutive verbs without any interruption. Having arrived at Bethlehem, both hungry and penniless, Ruth revealed her plan of action to Naomi. She said, El chanah sadev alakata, I shall go to a field to glean some food. To which her mother-in-law responds, Lechiviti, go, my daughter. And it is then that we read of the 3 consecutive verbs that perturb nearly every single one of our commentators. V'telech, v'tavo, v'telaket. She went, she came, she gleaned. And this is our question. What on earth does it mean that she went out and came back and then gleaned? Surely it would make more sense if the order of the sentence suggested that she went out, gleaned, and then came back. V'telech, v'telaket, v'tavo. Despite the pithiness and the rhythm of the verbal triplicate, something about the sequence feels amiss. And there are 2 resolutions to this question that I'd like to share with you today, starting with a connection to the Brothers Grimm. For a number of our sages, this moment in Ruth's life was defined by high anxiety. She was a Moabite immigrant, a foreign refugee, a bereaved widow in search of food, opportunity, and shelter. With a mother-in-law to care for and no friends or protection, she felt responsible but helpless, desperate but defenseless. She felt the relentless, endless pressure of balancing her dread and discomfort against the threat of hunger. So she mustered the will, despite a lack of conviction, to stand up and seek out agronomic debris so that she and her charge could have something to eat. But the streets and the trees and the fields were all so foreign and unfamiliar that she feared that even if she found scraps to eat, she would not find her way back to Naomi, leaving her not only hungry, but exposed and alone. So our sages suggest, like the poor and orphan Hansel and Gretel, Ruth made a trail to to find her way home. In their words, Mesamenet hadrachim, she marked the paths. V'halcha uva'a v'chazara, and she went back and forth time and again, shelo tit'eh b'shvilin, so that she would not get lost on the way. That is why the verse reads, V'telech v'tavo, she left and came back, she went back and forth, and only then v'talaket, that she collected grain. I remember vividly the age of 11 being taken by my grandparents for a trial run over the summer on the bus that would take me to school in the fall, and every few hundred yards my grandfather would ask me to mentally mark the places that we passed, from pubs to bridges to park, to give me a sense of calm and mark the journey as familiar. And in this moment, for our sages, Ruth was a tentative and timid immigrant, terrified of leaving her charge, but even more scared of letting her starve. So she warily, carefully found her way to a field to glean grain, but left cues along the route to help her find her way home. But there is a second reading of the scene that sees Ruth less as a timid immigrant in the mold of a grim fairy tale and more as a judicious, discerning, self-aware, and determined friend. For one sage, Rabbi Eliezer, the verse claims that v'telech v'tavo, she went out and came back before gleaning, not because she was scared of the prospect of getting physically lost, but in his words, halcha uvat, she went back and forth, ad shematza b'nei adam, until she found people hamhuganin leilech imahem, that would be decent, good company to travel with. Seen this way, Ruth's reticence was less about concerns related to traversing the unfamiliar Judean terrain than choosing allies to help her navigate the moral landscape. Seen this way, she was willing to wait to gather grain until she found the right kind of company. Ruth knew that any financial gain would fade if not subordinated to a moral frame of reference, so she waited. She knew that any economic vision would fail if not coupled with a moral mission. So she waited, and she knew that the infrastructure of the moral imagination sways and gives way if not held together with the help of good, devoted friends. She knew that any grain that she gleaned or any food that she found right now might feed her immediate needs, but would come at the cost of her future if she allied herself to people driven by self-preservation alone. With each passing day getting more and more desperate for grain, she evaluated and delayed. V'telech v'tavo, went in and out and in, waiting in anticipation of an association that would embrace faith, devotion, duty, and compassion as the keys to a life well lived. Unlike Julius Caesar, who was betrayed by his closest advisors, Ruth knew that the allegiances that we build, the alliances we forge, the company that we keep must be rooted in more than shallow mutual interest. If it is to last, it must be grounded in mutual care and a shared vision of the moral life. More than anyone else, Ruth shows that she knows the power of friendship. After all, it was her words that stirred Naomi and instilled her with hope right at the start of the story when she said, El asher telechi elech, where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Amech ami ve'elokaich elokai, your people are my people, your God is my God. The kind of lives that we lead are tied intimately to the kind of company that we keep, and we all have the ability to decide what kind of company we keep and want to be. And as we turned today to Yizkah, we filled our minds with the kind of company that inspires us, and let us continue to fill our memories with those whose lives lift us, drive us, and guide us toward the light. I wish you all a Shavuot Tov.